When I put together my tiny Pentium gaming PC, I ended up using a Sound Blaster Live as the sound card. Now, I mentioned in that video that I wanted to use an ISA sound card, and really I wanted to use an AW64. I'm trying desperately to find a home for one of those, but it was the Sound Blaster Live in the end. Now, the Sound Blaster Live series are kind of my go-to card when it comes to setting up a Windows 98 gaming PC. They're overall good enough, and I have enough experience with setting them up that even though it can be quite challenging to find drivers for them, I usually am able to make it work. And in this case, I was able to get this one mostly functional. I mean, I did have the game port working, which is always really nice. The CD audio pass-through is pretty much easy to work with, even if I had to modify this card. And I did have the full Windows sound drivers installed. Well, not like EAX and that stuff. I really don't care about that. But this did have some issues that I wasn't really that happy with. DOS games weren't tremendous, and I don't really like the MIDI set that this has. So I think today we're going to try swapping this out for something else. This video is sponsored by Lenode, and they sent me this goodie box that I thought I would open while I'm talking about them. Now, I know not everyone is the biggest fan of in-video sponsorships, but I'm really happy to have the opportunity to work with a company like Lenode that I actually like instead of someone trying to sell wireless speakers or pay-to-win mobile apps. I've been paying for and using Lenode services for years before they reached out as a sponsor, so I'm just happy to have this opportunity. Lenode offers virtual servers or cloud computing all around the world for very approachable prices. If you want to run a website or host a database or even just something as simple as a code repository, they're a great option, and they make it very easy to get everything set up and running. Here's some interesting things. This wireless battery bank. All right, I gotta see this. I just had to get a new phone, and wow, that's fancy. Anyway, if you want to check out the link in the description, you can get a free $20 credit to a Lenode account, and for a Nanode tier server, that would get you about 4 months. So highly recommend checking that out. Now, when choosing a replacement sound card, I had a very particular objective in mind, and it involves this, which is a Dreamblaster X2. Now, early sound cards like this Sound Blaster 16 were pretty good at music, and they would do things like emulate OPL or support MIDI output over the game port, and they were sufficient for most people. But if you were looking for that next level sound, they had a feature that is pretty handy if you can take advantage of it, and that is the Wavetable Header. And this is where the Dreamblaster X2 comes in. This is a MIDI synthesizer on a card, and it's actually a rompler, I know, but I'm just going to call it a synth because that's really a term that more people will know. Anyway, you take a card like this and you just plug it in to the header on the sound card, and now you have extremely enhanced MIDI capability. So I needed to find a PCI sound card with a wavetable header, and there are not a lot of options for those. And really, it came down to only one of these, an Aureal Vortex 2. Now, I've never used an Aureal Vortex 2, or at least I don't think I have. I'm pretty sure I have another one of these cards somewhere, but I bought this card on eBay specifically for this computer fairly recently, just because I wanted that wavetable header. I'm kind of biased against cards that are cut into funny shapes because they usually seem like they're cheaper products trying to save cost on PCB space, but this one is actually really good. Now, on my X2 here, I'm actually missing a part, and I removed that myself for reasons I'll get into a little later in the video, but you probably won't have to do that if you're not trying to cram it into a ridiculously tiny system. With that part on there, though, you are able to connect this to a modern computer and use it as a MIDI output device with its own 3.5mm stereo headphone jack. And another feature that it supports over USB is changing out the sound font. Now, this device uses a Dream MIDI synthesis chip that can have new sound fonts loaded onto it. There are a few sound fonts available for this right now, and they are working with Dream to try and create a sound font conversion tool to allow you to import your own. I don't think there have been many updates on that, so I don't know when or if that's going to happen. But for right now, I'm actually pretty happy with the sound font that's loaded on it, and it is a more general purpose one. Some of the others are a little more niche. Now, this Dreamblaster X2 was sent to me by Karopi, along with the PC MIDI card I'm using in my 486 and a Dreamblaster S1. It took me a long time to get around to using the PC MIDI card in my 486, and I haven't really wanted to take it apart and experiment with stuff, so I haven't had a lot of opportunities to use this with it. But this is actually the perfect card to be putting into the tiny Pentium PC. All right, before we begin the installation process here, let me go ahead and just give you a few updates on this computer since it's been a little while. The first thing is, right there is a slot on the CPU shroud for the fan there, and this means that it pulls air in from the top and then blows it out over the heatsink fins, which I didn't realize at first. So yeah, the fan does actually actively cool the CPU in this, so it's doing better than I thought. And the empty slot that's behind this riser that you can see in the other video is actually meant for a sound card. Someone looked through the manual and managed to find out that it's designed for a sound card with a crystal audio chipset. That's not going to be that great, and the sound card that goes here still lacks a game port, so it's not going to be that awesome, but that wouldn't be bad if you had one of these with that in there. It would definitely free up at least one of the slots. Okay, so let's go ahead and get this started. So installing this is super easy. First, we're just going to connect the Wavetable board to the card here, and that's it. And now we can slide it in. Simple as that. Connect the CD audio cable, and we're good to go. This one's so much smaller than the Sound Blaster Live, which if I put it right next to it, you can see the Sound Blaster Live pokes out a lot more at the edge of the bracket there. So this fits in this computer much better, and I don't need to mangle the CD header, which is nice. But there is an issue. When I go to put the Voodoo 2 in now, the Dreamblaster X2 is a little tall, and it actually hits. Now, if we take a look at this through the power supply slot there with a little bit of light, you can just barely see that it's touching. And this actually was more of a problem than I realized. I initially put a piece of tape over the whole Waveblaster card and thought that would be good, but it managed to blow a ferrite bead on my Voodoo 2, which I wasn't expecting to happen. Turned out it shorted a resistor on the back and managed to do that. So I had to repair my Voodoo 2 using another Voodoo 2 that was kind of scrap salvage with some bad passives on the back. So yeah, my Voodoo 2 was almost killed. And that's why I removed the 3.5mm stereo connector, but the USB port on here still touches a little bit. So what I'm actually going to do is take a piece of, this is probably PET plastic packaging material. I'm going to attach this to here over everything and just, yeah, put that on there to protect my Voodoo 2. This does all fit when it's in there. It's just a little tight. I'm not necessarily going to blame the Dreamblaster for being too tall here, but it could be a little shorter. It's just, yeah, this is a very, very tight system, and I don't have options to move things around. Like, I would probably put the Voodoo 2 another slot away from this if I could, but yeah, there aren't any options in here. So from here, this is pretty much the same to put this back together as it was before. I'm just going to use the weird bracket to clamp the cards in. And yeah, that's it. So let me go ahead and get this assembled the rest of the way. And then we'll see how this card performs with the computer booted. All right, I've got it all back together now after putting in the sound card. So let's go ahead and fire it up now. While it's starting up though, let me cover a few things. So first off, the speakers are missing and I have a different mouse. Now, these are related. I found out I really like using this setup on a fellow's keyboard drawer. It just kind of works because the peripherals can slide underneath of it. I don't know. I've never used one of those before, and I found myself enjoying it for this system. I have the speakers kind of wired into that, so I didn't want to undo all of that, and I'm doing audio capture direct here anyway. So I didn't want to bring those in here. And I did change out the mouse as well. Now I switched from one small Microsoft mouse to another, but the key difference is the original one was a ball. And I think you just heard the Windows startup sound. Yep. And this one is laser. The laser mouse works better on the keyboard tray because it's plastic and it kind of bows in a little bit. So the ball mouse wasn't able to rest flat enough on it. If you've ever tried to use a ball mouse like on your hand or your knee or something, it just doesn't work well because the ball needs to really be on a flat surface. But the keyboard tray just doesn't provide that. So, yep, but this works out pretty well, and I'm quite happy with it. Now, let's go ahead and check out the sound card in Windows. Now, as you heard when the computer was booted, the sound drivers are already installed and working on here, and I was able to copy them over with a flash drive using the USB port, and I put them on the hard drive, and they're so easy to install. You just go into the device manager, you find the sound card when it doesn't have the drivers, you go to properties, do the driver update, and then you're good. You just have to find the files in here and point it to it. It's going to ask you to swap back and forth between this and the Windows CD a couple of times, but really it's very straightforward, and even just doing the driver install that way automatically installed the Aureal Vortex control panel, and it worked totally seamlessly. It was super easy to set up, and I'm just amazed at that coming from Sound Blaster stuff. Like, unless you have some really exciting and weird Sound Blaster card like an Audigy or a 24-bit Live, you're gonna have a hard time getting them set up with drivers. I mean, every single one of these Sound Blasters is slightly different, and the drivers aren't compatible, even though they all, for the most part, look the same. It's just such a pain to get these things working. But the Audigy 2 was dead simple. Now, the drivers were hand-picked already from Phil's computer lab, but it still just really beat these out. I mean, these, you're always having to look at the CT number up here or there, or an SB number, and trying to match those up to the drivers, and then a lot of times the drivers still don't work. It's such a pain. That's honestly part of the reason why I wanted a new sound card for my new Windows 98 PC. Yeah, the whole thing was new, but I knew the new one would at least come with the sound drivers, and I still keep having to refer back to the sound driver CD that comes with it because the drivers for these suck as well. So it's just, it's such a nightmare. But this thing, I mean, I can't even overstate how easy this was. It set up everything. I already had the graphics gamepad here that I've been using set up from the Sound Blaster, and it was working, and I didn't have to redo anything. After it reinstalled the drivers, it still worked afterwards. It's been fantastic. So the driver experience on the Aureal card has almost completely sold me on it already. You having a good nap there, buddy? Okay, now let's go ahead and take a look at, or should I say, listen to some games on here. So let's start out with a Windows 95 type game. This is not going to sound really any different. This is pretty much what you would expect for something like Quake. As far as just actual sound sampling, yeah, it's gonna be fine. Games from, well, sound cards from this era really had this figured out, so actual sound quality wasn't really an issue. But the DOS support is where this gets really interesting to me, so let's go ahead and take a look at that. Now, if I wanted to play Doom on this computer before, I would have to use a shortcut to reboot the computer into DOS mode. But now, I don't have to do that. So let's go ahead and just run Doom right here. That sound. Sounds are working fine. I have never had this happen for the Windows 98 DOSBox type application. That's awesome, because I really didn't want to have to reboot to DOS all the time on this particular computer. I have plenty of other computers that are more dedicated DOS machines. Well, not plenty. I have one really nice 46, but this is perfect for just getting into some quick DOS games, and that's really what I want this system to be. But this can get even better. So if you hear right now, the music that's playing is actually the OPL 3 music. And we put a wavetable card in there. So I'm gonna go ahead and rerun the setup for this and choose General MIDI. Now let's give this a listen. Yeah, it's not rolling, but it's good. I really like this as a solution that's inside the computer. I mean, how? You can't beat that. I mean, yeah, I could fit a SC55 between the computer itself and the monitor, but that's really not what I'm going for here. So this thing really is awesome to me now, because I can have much better quality MIDI sounds inside the computer. And this isn't just for Doom. There's a lot of games that actually can take advantage of this. Who can resist Kitty Belly? Now, as much as I'm excited about Descent's MIDI capabilities, because I really like the Descent soundtrack too, it's a good example of one way that this is also just kind of better than the Sound Blaster Live. So I'm going to set it back to OPL 3 mode on here, and let's rerun this. Now, the OPL 3 samples on this really aren't the best. They're kind of lo-fi type bitrate, problematically. But the thing is that it at least works. So let's listen to OPL 3 on the Sound Blaster Live in DOS mode. Yeah, I'm not sure why that's happening, but it's playing back very inconsistently and mostly slow. So, point Aureal here. Now, I will say there has been one issue that I haven't really been able to figure out how to fix, but it's kind of a non-issue to me. So if I reboot the computer entirely into DOS mode and try and launch a game, you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, we can see here we have loaded Aureal Vortex drivers. So let's go ahead and head to Doom and try that out. Oh, It's actually working perfectly. I was having issues with this before. Well then, the card's flawless. Maybe OPL 3 wasn't working, and that was the issue. Let me try Descent. Oh, actually, I can just reconfigure this for OPL 3. Let's do that, because this is working with the Wavetable board, too. Oh, that's all total success. Okay, I have no idea. Maybe it was just Descent that I didn't work with. Let me try that out. Ah, yes, okay, so Descent seg faults here for some reason, and I really don't know why, but it works in DOSBox, so I'm fine with that. I don't know. This is a weird issue. I did not have this problem with the Sound Blaster stuff, so I don't know what's going on here, but as long as I can play the game, I don't really care. While we're here, though, one thing I did notice that I believe will work here is if we start in DOS mode and then load Windows, the sound card isn't going to work correctly. And yeah, after reboot, no sounds, which there should be menu sounds here and stuff going on in the background. It's probably that the DOS drivers are still loaded in the background and have taken up the address space for the Creative Sound Blaster emulation thing for this. So a full restart will clear that out and it won't be an issue anymore. Alright, I think that pretty much covers everything I wanted to with this upgrade. I'm shocked at how good this turned out. I wasn't expecting it to be like a full, complete solution. I mean, I was hoping it would be, but this just came out so much better than I thought it was going to. So I'm really happy with it. I'll link to the Dreamblaster X2 in the description below if you want to check it out. There's also the S1, which is a little bit lower cost if you don't want to be able to reprogram the samples, which I'm not sure which one that comes loaded with. If it comes loaded with this sample set, I would consider that one. But yeah, if you pair that with an Aureal Vortex 2, you get really awesome DOS support and in Windows 98 without even needing to reboot. So yeah, I would definitely say this is recommended. If you enjoyed this, you may want to subscribe because I'm sure I'll have some more later. If you want to support the channel, I am on Patreon, but for now, that's it. And I think I should probably scratch this kitty. One more thing before I go, I'm introducing a new tier on Patreon for hard copy supporters. At the beginning of every month, I will pull a list of everyone in that tier and print them out on one of my many vintage printers and include it at the end of every video for that month. So if you want to get on this list, you might want to check out Patreon.